Hello, and welcome to Voices Behind the Mask, conversations with local Hong Kong writers. Hong Kong has so many fine poets and script writers and travel writers and fiction writers plying their craft every day. And with us in the studio today is one of them, Michele Morollo,
Hey.
who works in many different genres and perhaps is best known here in Hong Kong for her fiction writing. Welcome, Michele.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Michele has been living and writing in Hong Kong since 2009. She is a freelance journalist and copywriter originally from Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
Michele has been writing professionally since 1997. Her publication credits include Harper's Bazaar, Tatler, CNN Travel, Lonely Planet, and the South China Morning Post.
Mm-hmm.
She had a collection of essays and poems published in London in 2007, and her stories have been published in 7 fiction anthologies. Right now, she is writing a leadership biography of a well-known Hong Kong businessman, studying for a master's degree in psychology, and completing a diploma in cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy. She is also working on her second collection of short fiction. So you've been very busy, Michele.
Yes, yes.
So we're very fortunate that you could spend some time in the studio with us today to discuss your work and creative writing. First of all, is there anything which I left out that you would like to mention?
No, I think you've covered it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michele's most recent book is a collection of fiction called Without, Stories of Lack and Longing, which you see here. Truly a very lovely and oftentimes poignant collection of short stories. So let's start with that, Michele. I wonder, can you tell us a bit about that collection, how you got started, a few of the characters, maybe some themes, that sort of thing?
Sure. So, in 2010, I received a grant from the Singapore National Arts Council, and I was living in Boston at the time with my husband, so I had a collection of essays and poems published by a publishing house in London when I was doing my journalism degree there in 2007. So after 2010, I got the grant. So basically, the National Arts Council were giving me like a monthly wage, stipend to work on short fiction.
That's every writer's
I
dream,
know,
right? You get paid to write fiction.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
So I did that for a year, and I actually completed a collection of 11 short stories, and I realized writing fiction is hard work. I mean, the earlier piece kind of came together, the one that was published in 2007, but to actually write fiction, not creative nonfiction or poetry, but stories, and to have a certain amount of time to produce them was no small feat, right? So, but I got to exercise my writing muscles, see yourself through beginning, middle, end, how to put a piece together.
Right, yeah.
And
very important beginning, middle, end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I sent that through for editing. My good friend Robert Yeo, who's a playwright in Singapore, very well-known playwright from he started writing in the 1960s, 70s in Singapore, so he helped edit it. But I was not entirely happy with that collection. I think because as part of the grant, I had to Singaporeanize all of the stories, which kind of it didn't really work for me. So I said, you know what, it's all right. I got the exercise. I managed to write, and I got the chance to practice. Hone the craft of writing, and I'll just leave that alone for a while. Then I moved to Hong Kong. So I think it was 2011. Maybe I was in Hong Kong, 10, 11. My husband's job brought us here, and I started freelancing. So before that, I was editing 2 magazines in Singapore, and then I moved to Hong Kong, and I was freelancing, and there was just so much work, copywriting, magazines.
Yes.
I was doing a lot of architecture writing.
yes.
And it's hard to say no to paid work to do creative writing that doesn't pay.
Of course.
So I just take on the paid work, and I'm just doing that and
Yes.
doing that and doing that. And meanwhile, I know I've done this. I've accepted the grant, and I've practiced my creative writing, and it's really what I would like to do.
Yes.
But now I don't have the time because I'm working all the time,
Yeah.
right? But in the back of my mind, there's this sense that you really should be writing fiction creatively. So in 2014, I applied for City U's MFA in creative writing.
Oh, yes,
Shushi
right.
was
Yep, the MFA
leading the
program.
course.
Yeah.
Yep. And I remember one thing Shushi said to me actually, if you want to write, you have to read. And
Yes,
I said, yeah, I
yes.
read, but because I'm doing so much writing, I don't have that much time to read. And I was like, she's absolutely right. But how is one, when you're working, to find the time to read and write?
Yes.
So that's tricky, right? So I applied for the course. I got accepted. And then a couple of weeks or months later, the university got back to me and said that they decided to end the course.
Yeah, the program unfortunately was closed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they refunded me my application fees, but I had set aside this amount of money to pay for the course.
So the application fee money and the tuition you had
I haven't
already-
paid the tuition yet.
But you had saved
Yes,
it up.
But I had saved it up.
And you set it aside.
I set it aside,
Okay.
and I said, I'm going to pay myself to read and write fiction.
What a great idea.
So I said, with that amount of money, when I have a potential client saying, and if I'm not that interested or I feel it'll take up more time than I'd like, I can say no because I'm paying myself
Yes,
now
yes,
to
brilliant.
write.
Yeah.
You know, which was, I guess, practice from getting the grant as well, where I felt like I was being paid to write. So and I had no idea where to begin because I didn't have formal training. I've never, had an actual course in creative writing. So I set aside a chunk of time, 3 times a week, 2 to 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours. I'd sit at a cafe.
Yes.
And I'd open my laptop, and I'm not allowed to answer work emails.
Yes.
I'm not allowed to send invoices or do anything else
Yes.
except write whatever stories need to be written.
Yeah.
And in 2008, that's 4 years, I finally had enough stories, 15 stories that I could edit and put into a book, and the book Without Stories of Lack and Longing was published in 2018. Sorry, not 2018.
And a very wonderful book it is, and it was
Thank
launched
you.
at the
Singapore Writers Festival
Singapore
at the
Writing
end
Festival.
of
Yes.
2018.
Very good.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So and yeah.
So maybe could you talk a little
bit
bit about
more.
maybe a couple of the characters or
Sure.
like themes and
Sure.
you know.
So when I started writing the stories, I had no idea what the theme would be. So how I usually start writing about something is if I've observed a situation in real life, maybe on the MTR,
Yes.
or I'm thinking about why is it that people whatever, or I meet a strange person. It could be someone I know, or it could be
Yes.
someone I see on the street maybe, or who I see
Yes.
every day on my way to wherever I'm going. And either I have very positive or very negative thoughts, and usually a lot of questions about
Yes.
why this person is behaving the way they're behaving,
Yeah.
or why it is a situation is the way it is.
So just to paraphrase this, one of the things that started you writing, say, a particular story is observing a situation, observing people, and asking questions.
Yes.
Why are they doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, or maybe something in my own life that I find troubling and I can't find an answer for.
Right.
Right.
And of course, we all have that.
Yes.
And so, as a second source, then for inspiration,
Yes.
looking inward
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is why I'm studying psychology now, but in a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities between psychology and creative writing because they both ask questions about the human condition.
Yes, and in fact, I found the psychology of your characters
Yeah.
in the book very engaging.
Oh, great, yeah. So yeah, my characters, I So that's how they come about. Usually either thinking about an aspect of myself or trying to understand an aspect of someone I've met in my daily life,
Yes.
and putting that together with maybe a bigger existential question about,
Oh,
you know, why is life like that? Or
Yeah.
why do all human beings have to suffer? Or what do human beings do with their suffering?
yes.
You know, things like that. And
Suffering, redemption, these kinds of
Yeah.
more universal themes, connecting up the
Yeah.
particular with
yeah.
something bigger than ourselves, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what happens is there will be, I will place the problem and the person in in a situation where the character and the conflict can kind of collide in a way that brings about catharsis, where the character will have to look at something they don't want to look at usually, or they're confronted with something that is uncomfortable for them to deal with.
So some kind of setting, which to me as a reader seems perfectly, I want to say natural,
Yeah.
but you as the artist have contrived that in order to set up a situation where they clash into each other and
Yes.
something comes out of
Yes.
it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that all stories in a way they do answer a question. Of course, you know what the answer is depends on the reader,
Yes.
and how the reader can relate to the character, and how the story can be relatable to their own lives, right?
Yes.
So I mean, I don't make the decision for them, but I try and present the outcomes in terms of how the character feels and acts and processes
Yes.
the event.
Now, I know that some writers
Mm.
like to write a question
Yeah.
about the characters or the situation or the, plot in
Yeah.
general, which is known to them, but which is not known to other people.
Right.
And everything which they write
Yeah.
is geared towards addressing that particular question. Is this something that you have done in any of your work,
So this is
or something similar,
yeah.
perhaps?
It's funny because in psychology that's what you have to do. You have to come up with a research question. No, I don't actually do it that way. I've tried the plotting style, and that doesn't work for me in the beginning.
Yes.
So I think the question is actually inchoate. It's not yet fully formed in my mind.
Right.
Even it's there as sort of an abstract idea that
Yes.
I want to explore,
Yes.
figure out the rights and wrongs the way I see it in my internal world of around the question, right? That, or maybe not show that it's not so black and white.
Yeah.
So there's a general theme. So I start with like
Right.
a theme, right? And a theme and a character who's affected by that theme, or maybe in denial of that theme.
Yes.
And I start writing like where is this character? What's this character doing? What is this character experiencing in her inner world, his inner world? What's their surrounding like? What do they see?
Yes.
Because what you see and what you experience affects how you end up feeling, right?
Yes.
So I start that way, and then once I have a very rough draft, or when I'm stuck, say maybe 5 pages, 4 pages, and I'm like, okay, where is this going? Then I ask the question.
Okay.
So I do ask the question, but not before, because when I ask the question before, somehow it makes it difficult for the character to kind of spring into being
Right.
in a natural way.
Right.
Because now the character, it feels like it's not. I've taken away agency from the character, so to speak. Like the character doesn't have their own mind and their own will anymore, because I just want them to answer a question. So
Yes.
that doesn't really work for me. But I can ask the question later to get the
Yes.
plot, because I feel that the plot. You need a question if you want to have a plot.
Yeah.
You know, you need to kind of know that you're getting from point A to point B.
To get that clash and some kind of catharsis
The-
from it.
To get the clarity, because I think all works of literature. I mean, of course, you have, some modernist free form writing that where the prose is really what it's all about, and that's all right as well. But I think most of the books that I've enjoyed reading, like I said, beginning, middle, end, right?
Yeah.
You need to know where you're going. You need a map.
It all goes back to Aristotle's Poetics, right?
Right,
Beginning,
right.
middle, and end.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it sounds fascinating, and I wonder if you could read a couple of pages or so from
Sure.
one or two of your
Sure.
short stories in Without.
Okay.
And if you could, maybe after you finish reading
Yeah.
it, could you maybe elaborate on the craftsmanship in that particular
Okay.
excerpt,
Okay.
like, setting, character, plot, that kind of thing.
Will do.
If you want to set up us first,
Okay.
tell us what the context of this is.
Sure.
That will help.
Okay. So, listen if you will. This story is about a Singaporean young man named Marcus Low, who is studying creative writing at City University in London. He's doing an MFA program. So, hungry for literary fame, an MFA student struggles with his chosen path till he meets an unlikely mentor. Okay, so I guess Marcus is probably around, 19, maybe 20. I
Okay.
forgot exactly how old he was. But, so he's thinking, have I chosen the right path? Creative writing, come on, So, okay, so now he is, he's been told by his professor that all the creative writing students, it's been suggested that every Thursday night they go to this adult education center where they hold liberal art workshops and lectures called the Muse. It's called the Muse. Okay, so it's a place where they have, it's like workshops like TED Talks or something like that. But basically, like, people in the industry are talking about about creative writing, or maybe about art or something else, and all these liberal arts students are told by their lecturers, you should attend that. It will help you decide on your thesis theme, or so. Okay, so Marcus is walking there now. All of his classmates have decided they don't want to go because tonight's speaker is not famous. He's like according to them, a nobody. So, if it's a Man Booker Prize winner or like a BBC producer, they'll go. But this guy is like, he's not very well known, so they don't want to go. So Marcus is going because Marcus is a good little student. He's a Singaporean. So, okay. So it was cold and wet out, and Marcus wondered why he hadn't just bought a microwavable meal, headed home, and plonked himself in front of the television. It was too late now. He was almost at his destination. As consolation, he told himself that perhaps listening to this Sharma fella might give him some direction. Maybe it would help him decide if he should abandon creative writing for a more practical education. As he turned a corner, he pondered the futility of his ambitions. Why couldn't I have picked something safe like banking or business? I'm Singaporean, which means I'm never going to be a good writer. Let's face it, people from Singapore are boring. We're like sheep. We're too obedient to write stories that people will actually want to read. Maybe if I had been born in another place or another time, then I could be a real writer. The generation I belong to, Gen X, that doesn't help either. We've had no wars, no suffering. Where are we going to find good stories? I think I should just go back home, study marketing or something else instead. This was where Marcus's head was at when he approached the entrance of the 5-story red and black building where the Muse was located. He entered the front door, rode the elevator up to the 3rd floor, exited and made his way down a narrow corridor to a white door which opened to a small auditorium with a thrust stage. Up on the stage, Marcus saw a plump Indian man with a thick, peppery beard. The man looked like he was in his 60s, but the perky brown bowler hat and green and purple striped shirt he wore made him look sprier than his lined face and grey mane suggested. His eyes were bright, and with his hands in his pockets he looked completely at ease as he surveyed the new arrivals. Marcus took a seat 5 rows from the front of the stage. He looked around and noted that there were less than a dozen people in the audience, half of them attending to their mobile phones. He felt a little sorry for the speaker, who would have to address such a paltry crowd. But the man didn't look like he was in need of any pity. He walked along the edge of the stage, smiling and making eye contact with every member in the audience, as if acknowledging each personally. Then he stopped in the middle of the stage. "Thank you all for being here," he said, clasping his hands together. "The weather's miserable today, isn't it? I'm sure many of you would rather be snug and dry at home. I'll do my best to make this worth your while. My name is Mohan Sharma, and I teach creative writing and literature at Middlesex University. This evening, I'll be talking about finding stories and the importance of truth in fiction." Marcus sunk back into his seat and listened. "My students frequently tell me they cannot find anything to write about, that pulling things out of their head is too difficult. I tell them that inspiration is all around, that as long as they breathe, they have a story to tell. Pick up the newspaper, there's something there. Ask your neighbor how their day was, and you might find an idea. I've noticed that most of my students who are new to creative writing tend to lean towards autobiography or melodrama. There's nothing wrong with memoir, but most people's assessments of themselves are seldom accurate or interesting. Some of my students have wonderful imaginations, but they work only from fantasy, so their stories have the quality of a Hollywood movie, over-the-top plots and characters that are larger than life. The problem with so many of us who write is that we have forgotten how to tell the simple and beautiful truth. So we resort to gimmicks to get attention. But really, who can blame us, right? Because isn't that what we writers need? Just a little extra attention.
There's so many things going on in that excerpt. So many different types of discourses. There's interior monologue.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a speech or a presentation. There's a lot of very detailed exposition going on. Could you address, maybe talk about some of the
Sure.
elements of craft?
Yeah, so this piece was one that I had been working on for this was one of the earlier pieces I started working on as part of the National Arts Creation Grant that I got. So it started, and it just kind of changed. So later on in the story, you kind of see what essentially storytelling is about, because Mohan Sharma, this literature teacher, creative writing teacher, ends up telling a story about a woman in India who he's met, who's deformed, and how she tells 3 different stories about how she ended up begging outside the temple. And it's funny because Marcus is telling us the story as he sees Sharma, and Sharma is telling the story as it's relayed to him by the woman.
Yes.
And well, in the end, if you read the story, you've read it, right?
And
So
then you're telling the story to us.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So
Yes.
storytelling is a bit like broken telephone. It's one thing that a person, nothing is original when you...
Broken telephone. What an interesting
Well,
analogy.
yeah, because
Yes.
somebody tells somebody a story, or you hear something, or you
Yes.
see something, and then it goes through your filter,
Yes.
and you interpret it, and you tell a different story.
Yes.
And then that person who hears your story is definitely going to interpret it with their own experiences, and they're going to have their own take on whatever information you have given them, and they send it along to the next person. But at the core of that is that we have to care enough to listen in order to absorb the story to the extent that we can use the information and do something creatively with it. Because if you have not attended to the story, Well, if you're not attentive to what your lecturer is telling you in class, or you're not paying attention to this video, nothing's really going to go in, and you're not going to be able to use the information to come up with something that is yours.
Yes.
So the most important thing, I think, in writing is that empathy, that ability to listen completely and give your attention completely to another person's experience. Yeah.
So empathy and sensitivity are not just virtues for a writer, but necessities for a writer.
Necessities, yeah.
But there's a flip side to that too, isn't there? Which is, at the same time, writers need to be a little bit thick-skinned.
Yeah,
well, I don't want
yeah,
to say
yeah.
thick-skinned,
Yeah.
because with feedback in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Oh, okay. So I think I have this story from when it first started. It's been through more than 28 different revisions.
How many?
28.
28 different revisions. I want to pick up later on that notion of revision, but
Yes.
please continue.
Yeah. So it's because so I'm part of a writers group
Yes.
with the Hong Kong Writers Circle. I'm also the secretary of the Hong Kong Writers Circle, and we meet every month. So I will write a piece, I send it to them, they send it to me. We give each other feedback. This doesn't work. This works. This doesn't quite make sense. And then I get the feedback from my friends, and I write again. So sometimes it's easier, especially if I already know like it's a big issue problem, like this character is just not believable. Then I'll write from scratch. So I'll have one piece here, and then I'll start writing it all over again.
Yes.
I also have a writing partner who helps me do that. As much feedback as you can get from your
Yes.
readers is essential, because you're not, well, if you want to just read it on your own, then that's fine, you write for yourself, but writing is for other people. So you have to get your personal ideas across in a way that consensually most people anyway, can understand what you're trying to say
Yes.
very clearly, and more than understand, that they can relate to it.
Yes.
So how do you do that? Only through asking other readers what they think,
Yes.
and whether what you're trying to say has been conveyed to them.
Yes.
And if not, then you'll have to rewrite.
Yes, and this is part of the whole creative process. I
Absolutely,
think.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your own creative processes or process? What are some elements of it? How does it work? Is it so mysterious that it escapes the articulation of words? Or?
No. I think, well, there is a lot of it is just sitting down and shutting everything else out, which is very hard to do in this day and age, with Facebook. So just, I like to write in a cafe, because there's something about, I don't know what it is, but there's something about having people moving around that reminds me that writing is a social activity. Because if I'm alone, there's the tendency to write for myself. But when I'm aware of like just human energy, I'm not communicating with anyone there, but feeling that human energy, I realize that this is why I'm writing, because it's not easy to be a human being. All of the things we experience in life, it's not exactly there's joys, there's sadness, there are difficulties, but it's about connection. Writing is about making another person feel less alone. And I think that's why, because I feel alone. I feel alone, and I feel that I have too many questions, and there are a lot of things that make me go, this is not fair, this is not right, this is, how do I deal with this? And but I have to, right? What's the other option? You show up and you deal with life. But writing makes it a little easier, because it helps to make sense of things. It gives meaning to the things that are not so pleasant in life sometimes, or the ways human beings behave towards each other that just seem painful and hurtful. It just gives it all context.
And I want to relate this to what you said earlier about the broader, like, existential kind of questions. So for yourself, trying, like the rest of us, to be the best person that we can, with the cards that have been dealt us by life.
Yeah.
One way to make sense out of that and to create meaning out of that
Yeah.
is through writing
Yeah.
and constructing meaning through writing,
Yeah.
which on the one hand is a solitary activity,
Yeah.
but in your particular case you find that solitary activity can be done in the midst of a group of people so that you feel connection to them.
This is the paradox. It's a solitary activity done for the community. It's like, okay, so in this story, for instance, right? I think when I thought like, oh, I have to write to be known, like my writing has to be good, I have to be like a respected writer or whatever. So this guy Sharma in my story, he's basically he teaches creative writing at Middlesex University, which is, you know, it's a well known enough. It's not like the best or whatever. He used to write brochures for a tractor manufacturing company, which is what most writers, a lot of writers write things like the labels you see on your can of soup.
Right.
They're writers. They can
Yes.
probably write very well, but they have to
Yes.
put food on the table.
Right.
Not everyone's going to be Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. You know, most writers are not.
Yes.
But is that going to stop them from writing? I think that's what this story is about. Because, so Marcus here is going, oh, I should have done banking. I'll be rich and famous. I have a friend who's now got a car and a house because he's chosen the right path. He's, you know, because writing is, the rewards are very, they're not the same type of rewards that you get with a lot of the other flashy professions in a way, because you slog and you have to ask, if you're doing it for the fame and recognition, if you're doing it to have people clapping and going well done, then you're in the wrong profession, because that's not what writing is about, you know. Writing should be about helping, because that's you know, that's it should be about, like I said, you know, making another person feel less alone, because I have had times where I've been really lonely and I've read certain books and I'm like, oh, of just the comfort of a good book, you know.
So there's almost, well, not almost, there is for you a moral imperative.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's a part of your creative process.
Yeah, that is a part of my creative process, is answering the questions that I feel we all need answers to, or that I feel that a lot of us are choosing to be blind to, that we need to look at it. So yeah.
Wow.
That's
heavy. Very interesting.
Yeah, because I'm not going to win a Pulitzer Prize. So if I try and think of it that way, I'm never going to write.
No, I admire the how your aesthetic is so well developed. Obviously, something you've thought a lot about, and it obviously fuels your writing.
Aesthetics in terms of like the
way that you view art in general.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Let's move on. I don't think we have a lot of time left.
Okay.
But I do want to ask you for
Okay.
something very important for our audience.
Okay.
And that is, and you've kind of touched on this sort of around the corners or
Yeah.
tangentially, advice for young writers.
Okay.
Writers who maybe are taking their first course in creative writing and
Right.
they're wondering, is this for me? And what kind of advice would you, maybe a few points, what would you tell them?
Read.
Read.
Never stop reading. Read as
Yes.
much as you can.
Yes.
Get feedback from people who are just as committed
Feedback.
as
okay.
you.
Yes.
You know, who want to write as well and be writers.
Yes.
Get feedback, and be willing to throw away what doesn't work and start afresh if you have to, because you know, I would say that more than half of the stories I've written are thrown away, because you're going to write a lot. You have to write a lot of things that don't work before you find something that works. And I would say, if you find that you don't like writing, like you don't enjoy it, then don't bother, because you know, it's to stick with it. I think you have to find pleasure in sitting there and actually one word after another, one sentence after another, and you do have to love the written word to devote so much of your time to producing fiction. You know,
Yeah.
I think yeah.
So a love of writing,
Yeah,
and actually
reading.
sitting down and doing the writing,
Yeah,
and then getting feedback on it,
yeah,
right? And
Yeah.
maybe along the way, solving some of the big questions in life on an individual basis. Anyway.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
addressing
Yeah.
that. Thank you for reading your work for us today, Michele. Thank you for
Paul.
talking about your craft, about the
Thank
creative
you.
process, advice for our audience today, and best wishes for all of your writing endeavors and all of the other many things that you're doing. It's a very busy time for you, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you so
to the
much,
studio
Paul.
today. And for
Thank
everybody
you.
out there, thank you for watching.
Thank you very much. Good luck with your writing.